Good morning to everybody and a big welcome. Today, my name's Peter and I work with the RDK Sports International team, and I'm really excited today to be chatting again. I've had the pleasure to chat with Dr. Glenn Fox, and I won't steal any of your thunder, Glenn, as we can work through, but I might get you to give a little introduction to everybody and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, calling in from Los Angeles, and I won't share just how warm and sunny it is outside. I understand where you are, Peter. It's a little bit cold. So just as a way of background, so I'm a neuroscientist by training, but I teach entrepreneurship. So I'm a business professor at the University of Southern California, and my area of focus is on helping students uh, take the right mindset for starting businesses, helping them learn to make decisions that can lead them down the path of entrepreneurship, help them develop companies, help them find customers, and generate revenue. In the past, I worked with an institute at USC called the Performance Science Institute, which I led for 3+ years, almost 4 years. And in that institute, I worked with all manner of professional sports teams. Worked with Pete Carroll from the Seattle Seahawks, and worked with a lot of high-level military organizations called the United States Marine Corps, and also got to know quite a few Olympians and all kinds of people everywhere in between. And my job now focuses on blending all three of my big passions, which is neuroscience, entrepreneurship, and performance. These all go together very well. And I'm fortunate to have the kind of job where I get to talk about only things I find are really interesting and get to tell people about them and help them use whatever I know for their own gain. So I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm excited to hear. And just thanks everyone for showing up. I hope I can provide some good things. So I'm watching the chat. I've got chat window open as well. So if you have any other questions, I know Peter and I have a few things to cover, but I'm ready for anything.
So I will say that as well. So there is a Q&A function down to the bottom right of the screen. So feel free to throw through any questions as we go. I suppose, Glenn, to start us off, and I suppose we won't do too much into that neuroscience journey, but where you're at today and helping people open their eyes to what opportunities may be to running organisations and the challenges that people may face. Obviously, we're in the midst of a bit of a global pandemic at the moment, as we may. What are some of the challenges you've seen new business owners be faced in regards to starting a business and creating an organisation?
Yeah. I want to start really high level with this, which is actually has to do with the nature of capitalism and where innovation comes from, and how we can best take advantage of this system. Capitalism is a odd system, but it's what we have. It has its drawbacks, but it's where we are. And the system is really set up to benefit people who can generate value. The system is set up to benefit people who can find ways to help others in such a manner that they'd be willing to trade their resources for it, right? So when you choose to start a business, you choose to become an entrepreneur, you're taking advantage of the system in a way where you can have autonomy, you can have independence, you can lift other people, you can lift yourself out of many situations. And entrepreneurship is one of the key drivers of social change and social mobility that we have left. Um, I think even the evolution of university and college education is rapidly changing. And those of those of you who are inspired to start businesses and inspired to find ways to use commercial solutions to everyday problems for people can really lead a wonderful and meaningful life. And so it's really the system. The next thing is that entrepreneurship is the major driver of innovation in our society, in the Western societies, um, and that's kind of how the system works. Is the people who learn to innovate take advantage of all sorts of things. Now, it's hard, and it takes a tremendous amount of risk. And it means working harder. It means putting responsibility on your shoulders that other people maybe don't want to do. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, there's nothing wrong with not being an entrepreneur. There's nothing. Um, but for those of you who feel the calling to try to add value, you can really do a lot of really wonderful things. So that's on the kind of the broad level of why you should consider being an entrepreneur. It's important for society. It's important for social mobility, and it can provide a lot of autonomy. Now, for each individual person, should you start a business? Well, I think being an entrepreneur for entrepreneurship's sake is not the way to go. The best way to be an entrepreneur is to want to see a problem that you want to solve. And right now, of course, we have no shortage of problems. We have no shortage. So looking at commercially viable solutions to the problems you see, I think climate change is the thing we need to team up on, and there are commercial solutions to it. No perfect solutions exist, but if you're somebody who's motivated by great problems, there are ways to provide goods and services to solve these problems, right? This is the system. So being an entrepreneur for entrepreneurship's sake, I don't really recommend, but seeing a problem that you're really passionate about solving and having the courage to take it upon yourself to help society solve it, um, it is a great pathway to a life of meaning and profit, and also hopefully helping things. So I'm a big fan of sort of impact investing and impact entrepreneurship, where you can work in the problems that really see fit. So right now, climate change is um, offering actually a lot of opportunities for growth in terms of tech. For biotech, there's growth in synthetic biology, there's growth in behavior change, there's growth in getting people, in finding ways to be more efficient and taking advantage of some of the savings. We have, at least in the United States, we have an aging population, and that's a huge problem. It's going to be a big stress on our culture. And so solutions that can help people age in place, that can age healthily. There are big pots of money from the insurance companies and from the government that can create really, really profitable enterprises that help solve these problems. So finding a problem and saying, okay, I can carve out this little niche to help solve that problem. And in so doing, lift myself up, lift up the company. You're well on your way. The
No, that's
other, the
fantastic.
last, yeah. Oh, the last thing you mentioned was COVID, right?
Yeah.
And um, look at, we're talking on a platform called Zoom, which nobody had heard of 2 years ago, maybe a little bit, and they are now printing money because of it. So some people have done quite well. Sadly, many people have not, and I'm just so compassionate. I think it's so hard to see the stories of these small business owners in Los Angeles. um, what we have seen, though, are that small business owners are fighters, and that the number of restaurants and bars and salons and different service industries that have found these incredibly flexible and entrepreneurial ways to market themselves and help fulfill the needs of the community. I'm sure they wouldn't trade it, but many of them have done incredible things to pivot, rotate their business to provide, all kinds of services to other things. So, um, unfortunately, it's not worth it. Of course, the pain has been bad, but you are seeing how different entrepreneurs can really handle and take advantage of it. And other businesses and things have sprung up. Like anybody, you're in the sports industry. We know well now that home training and virtual training sessions with elite trainers, these things have exploded, right? We're realizing that a lot of the boundaries we put on where we need to do whatever it is we need to do have dissolved considerably. And we're moving ahead in a world that, I mentioned climate change intentionally, because hopefully some of the post-COVID benefits will be that a lower reliance on fossil fuels, that we need to commute and do all these different things, and greater efficiencies and greater humanity, so that we can be doing work that's meaningful from wherever we want to do it. where we can stay productive and live in places where we don't have to drive all the time. So there are some upward cycles here too that we should take advantage of. Um, a good entrepreneurial slogan is never let a crisis go to waste. And you see that with sports, athletes as well, that they'll look at different strategies to take to win the game, to train differently, to recover differently, and they'll look at ways to look at injuries to rebuild and become stronger. So, I don't like this any more than anybody else says, but you might as well frame it as an opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I suppose with your key areas of study and the people you've worked with in the past as well, do you see key attributes from some of the, I suppose, deemed successful people that you've worked with in entrepreneurship, in coaching, in sports? Is there some key attributes you can share that you see within these people?
Oh gosh, yeah. Um, how much time we got, Peter? I mean, it's like
Plenty.
that's my whole life right there.
Makes my
No, but
job
there
easier, so
are.
go
They
for it.
absolutely are. They absolutely are. So, okay, I'm gonna say three things. Let me say three things. So one big message and then two data points. One big message, the theme for people who tend to do well in these high pressure environments. In a high pressure environment can include, of course, sports, business, but it can include anything else. It can include being a teacher, being a student, and trying to study during all this. It can include many different definitions of pressure. So people who tend to thrive under these things, the ones I've best experienced are elite military service members, and athletes and entrepreneurs. But what we learn from them can apply to everyone. So here's the big trend. They see the difference between the external world and the internal world. Um, and they see that those two things don't really depend on each other. So the moral of the story would be that the people who have this high performance mindset, um, they they use their inner resources at all times, regardless of what their external resources are. So, in other words, they're always looking for a competitive advantage that lies within their own mindset, within their own ability to frame a challenge in a way that gives them mechanisms and levers to handle and pursue a success. Now, it's this weird thing. So something like gratitude, which is an emotion I've studied for many years, the research shows that people who are very grateful don't necessarily have more. They're not necessarily in better shape. It's not that the people who are super rich also happen to be super grateful. It's actually completely independent of that. The people who enjoy the benefits of gratitude do so because they're better able to focus on their own internal resources to handle their challenge. So that's kind of the universal takeaway, is learning to see our internal story as being independent of our external circumstances. That's what these high performers do. So in our study of the reconnaissance Marines, we found that the guys who could do the most push-ups, who could run the fastest, who could do the most sit-ups, were the biggest and strongest Marines, weren't necessarily more likely to graduate from this training. The people who are more likely to graduate were those with a positive mental attitude. And I know that's a really corny term, positive mental attitude. I know that sounds weird, but I'm using it as a really general term just to say they tended to look at things and say, what can I do here? What does this mean? And they tended to have a better story about what they were going through. So they're less likely. This is an interesting thing, is that people often quit a challenge when they're looking at the challenge, not when they're doing the challenge. So in our study of Marines, they're more likely to quit when they're looking at the pool. This was like an aquatic, it's an amphibious unit, meaning they have to do a lot of swimming and hiking. And um, the guys were more likely to quit while they were looking at the pool rather than being in the pool. So again, this is the difference in that internal versus external story, that simply looking at the pool was enough to make them go, I'm out, I can't do this. And once they got in the pool, they're actually much less likely to quit. So you would think, though, that you would be in the pool drowning would be when you quit, right? Because you think, oh, our stress will go up, and then our stress will hit a level, and then I'll quit. But no, the story is the most powerful thing, and who knows what that story is. And not everybody needs to go through all that. That's fine, quitting or not. That's completely fine. But when they quit is really interesting, because it showed that this gap between the external and the internal world, um, the wider that gap was, the less likely someone was to quit. In entrepreneurs, we see a similar theme. When we looked at when studies have shown that successful entrepreneurs have a number of key traits. Now, you would think to be a successful entrepreneur business owner, the first thing everybody thinks that you need is money. You need access to capital to grow your company. You need money to make money, right? We've heard that. And
Yep.
it doesn't hurt. Obviously, it does not hurt. But the more common mental traits, or the more common traits, are mental. Again, the more common traits of successful entrepreneurs is that they tend to be optimistic and they tend to be goal oriented. Um, and those are two internal traits where you have a story going on that is different than the external world. The next thing entrepreneurs are really known for is psychological adaptability. So they don't tend to get stuck on one path of action. They use information rapidly, and then they make their best guess in the light of very tough decision making. And tough, what makes a decision tough is when you don't really know what's going to happen, and you have to do something. Those are hard decisions. Easy
Yep.
decisions are like, okay, I need to eat this. I need to eat this healthy thing and not this unhealthy thing. Like that's like, there are easy and hard decisions. What makes a decision hard is when things are vague and we don't know what to do. And those kind of decisions are where entrepreneurs tend to enjoy those decisions a little bit more. They tend to enjoy that ambiguity, and tend to find ways to seek clarity in what they do, in order to move forward. So they don't need, in other words, again, internal versus external, entrepreneurs know they don't need perfect circumstances to go forward.
Well, I've had a question that's popped up here as well. When you talk about entrepreneurship, what have been your key innovations / ideas?
Do they mean that in terms of me, like me personally, or
Yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of
you
what I've seen?
personally. Let's go
Me,
you personally. Well, let's go a little bit of both. What you've seen and what your beliefs are around it as well.
well, I mean, the it's kind of an interesting question. So I would only lightly consider myself an entrepreneurial person. I'm very entrepreneurial. I resonate with entrepreneurs. I feel like I get them, right? So I'm very entrepreneurial. Raised around entrepreneurs. My dad was an entrepreneur. And so I've been around them, and I'm just super comfortable with entrepreneurs. They're like my people. So, um, but I wouldn't consider myself an entrepreneur because I work for USC.
Yep.
So I have I
Fair enough.
have
Yep.
I've not I owned a company, owned a data science company, for many years, and we worked and did analytics for small, companies and for startups, and we did data science. But that's not really, it was entrepreneurial. It wasn't really necessarily an entrepreneur. So I would say that, to me, the key innovation for entrepreneurship, the thing that's really been so amazing about it, is that it's a scientific process. So when I do research as a neuroscientist, I'm always looking for, how do these variables affect this other variable, right? How does changing this and that affect this, right? How does this depend on these things? And entrepreneurship is just a bunch of people running their own experiment. And the experiment is, how can I create value? It's not necessarily how can I create, money. Money comes after you've found a way to answer value. So the key innovation to me is the most interesting thing to me is that entrepreneurs think like scientists, and every entrepreneurial journey is a science experiment where you're trying to use all these variables to create money, to create value. So how does value depend on what we do over here? And then this is the basis for what's called the lean startup methodology. So if you want to become an entrepreneur, I'd suggest reading the Lean Startup. It's not so good for small business owners. If you want to do open a coffee shop or something like that, this book won't help as much. But if you want to start a new technology, you want to start a new approach, a new market, a new completely new invention, then this book is great because it teaches you how to follow the scientific method to launch your company. And so I had kind of come across my own thought about this to say, oh, entrepreneurship is just science. It's just a science experiment. You put out a bunch of stuff and you see what happens. Um, and you test and tune your hypothesis and you change the experiment, et cetera. And so I thought this was great. And then it turned out a guy had written a book about this and it's like a whole thing. So nobody's ever original. We always think we're so original. I'm not. But anyway, so that was kind of one of my big takeaways. And then of course, the main thing is just like, gosh, man, the mindset just matters so much. So my big innovation is really showing that gratitude makes a big difference for people, that helping entrepreneurs work on their mindset, work on their approach to things, really helps them succeed, really helps them stay comfortable, stay resilient, helps them recover. So the degree to which people need to take care of their mental health during their founding journey, that's my big innovation. That's what I do is help entrepreneurs train their mindset. So it's
Do
not to
you,
make me an entrepreneur, but that's my big innovation
yeah.
to the field. Yeah.
And do you feel that that mindset is just as, or if not more important than the idea?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I think it's the mindset in combination with really hoping to solve a problem. The mindset to be an entrepreneur for entrepreneurship's sake, the purpose will kind of run out on that. And I think finding a problem you're so passionate about solving and having that resilient, optimistic, grateful mindset, and you say, you know, I want to learn everything I possibly can about this problem set. I think that's kind of the overlap you really need. There's something too about being motivated by a purpose that's a lot bigger than ourselves, and then being motivated by a purpose of being cool and looking like an entrepreneur. And so we see this with the Marines a little bit, that there's some differences in terms of who quits. The people that say, I want to do this because I want to be the baddest guy on the block. I want people to think I'm awesome. I want people to think I'm amazing. They're actually they're not like it's a guarantee to quit. These are fuzzy areas, by the way. But those people tend to be a little bit more likely to quit than the people who are there to say, I just want to see what I'm capable of. I'm interested in serving something and seeing what I can do, right? Not I want people to know how awesome I am, but say, well, I'm curious about what I'm capable of. That's that sort of active entrepreneurial, resilient mindset that will carry through a lot of things. And so, you know, to better answer your question, Peter, you could have the perfect product market fit, but if you're a crummy leader, if you don't have good values, if you don't have the right mindset for that, that product can tank. And there's tons and tons of stories about that, you know. So, you know, having a good product, but not having a mindset, having a good amount of capital behind you, but not having the creativity and the adaptability. Um, you know, ideally you have both, but
Yeah. Yep.
you can certainly ruin a good opportunity with a bad mindset.
Yeah. No, absolutely. As the question comes through, and it's interesting as it was kind of leading through onto the next topic. You've got the idea, you've got the belief in yourself to do it. How important do you feel a network is surrounding you to be able to not just sell your product, but have people to lean on? And
Mhm.
what would you recommend to people in regards to starting that network?
Yeah. So, two questions. So, is it important? Yes. We have a saying in our entrepreneurship center that your network is your net worth. That your network is your net worth, and so your network is everything. It's important. There's a lot of theory around this. It's important that in your network you know the role that everybody's going to serve, in a sense that you kind of know who's where and don't move people around too much, in the sense that you're going to need some people that you can vent to say, oh, this is going so bad, I've lost the plot, we need to do this. And you need someone who can kind of help there. You know, that's a different conversation than you want to have with your investors, very different conversation you want to have with your customers. um, but your network can be different things, and you'll have networking to try to develop your business relationships, right? So that's a different hat that you want to wear when you're trying to do that, what's called business development, to say, okay, we need to partner with RDK Sports. Let's say I'm a physical trainer, and I want to train the most elite players, and RDK Sports represents a bunch of them. So my reach out to you is going to be, here's my benefits, here's how I work, here's this, that, the other. You probably have quite a few people doing this. And
Yeah.
so that's different approach than saying, okay, I've got a partner, I've got a bank that loves, I've got 10 clients that I do rehab with, and I've got some revenue. Those clients are going to be a little different. And so learning to treat that. And then sometimes it's like, look, I don't need RTK to be my client, but I'd love advice from them. Like, hey, look, I'm hoping you can give me some advice. I'm not necessarily looking for a new client, but I want to get into this. So there's a saying too, that when you want money, ask for advice. And when you want advice, ask for money.
Yeah.
So,
Not bad. I like that.
okay, so that's kind of why it's important, and kind of how to think about putting people in the places where you're like, okay, we're going to need clients, we're going to need vendors, we're going to need customers, we're going to need, it's all these kind of things. And then the question from one of our folks here is, what's the best way to grow your network? One, it takes time. Um, takes time. The two rules that I like to follow, one are always lead with, how can you help? Start by asking how you can help. Don't ask for anything up front. Saying, what can I do to help? If you're just getting started, I personally have found that giving away my time, which is my most valuable resource, and it's yours too. Giving away my time to learn something I wanted to get into is how I've gotten where I am. When I was first wanting to become a neuroscientist, I volunteered in a neuroscience lab. And yes, I had a degree. I had graduated from the University of California. I had a good degree. I was ready, but I had never worked in brain imaging, so I had to volunteer. To join the Performance Science Institute, I'd never worked with that thing. I was a neuroscientist. I had a PhD. I had all the fancy stuff, but I wanted to pivot. So I basically worked for free to build the mission statement and build the framework for the Institute that we then used to raise funds. So I built my network by saying, how can I help? What's the problem? And then when people learn that they could depend on you, when people learn that they can depend on you to provide help, opportunities are gonna open up, and you have to be patient. It goes again to that thing I said earlier of like, don't try to, once you kind of put somebody in a position, um, work with them in there. It's hard to move people around in there, right? You've got maybe you have a friend who's a good advisor, is a successful entrepreneur, and is giving you advice, and then you go to her for money. She might say, whoa, wait, whoa, right? But if you're thinking, okay, I need her to help fund this, then you need to have the courage to kind of breach that topic early. It's kind of like dating, Peter, if we may. But you kind of need to, you find someone you're interested in. You don't want to get you don't want to be friend zoned, so to speak. So I'm sorry if it's a little coy. I'm sorry, but it's kind of like, and you also don't want to date someone that's inappropriate. They shouldn't date, right? You have to have the right thing. You have to know relationships and know how to manage them. So if it's an advisor who you need to, to be your advisor, keep them there. So when you're building your network, be honest with yourself first about what you need from the people, and be humble that when you're just starting out, they've probably heard it before. So when you go and you're like, hey, RDK Sports, I'm going to be your next big agent, you're probably like, thanks. Right? Or you're like, can I please buy you coffee and learn how you got into this? I would love to do it. Do you have any project? Can I buy you guys lunch at your next project so I can come listen to it? Right? That kind of thing. What can I help you with? Can I wash your car? No, I'm just kidding. But, can I help you with this thing? One good way to get in is to ask people, do you have any unfinished projects I can help with? Do you have anything sitting on back burner you could just give to me and I can help with? Do you need someone to call phones? You need someone to pick up the phone and do some cold calls. Showing that availability when you're just starting out, that's how you grow your network. And then the next best thing is be a great student partner to all your fellow group members. If you're in a group, you're doing a student group, be a good group member, because all you and your friends are all going to grow and grow and grow, and all your friends are going to do amazing stuff. So start with the people you have right now. No, they're not rich and famous right now, but they're going to go on, they're going to keep working hard, and they're going to grow. So your network will grow with you. So just be a good human, be a good person, be a good partner, and people will remember you and trust you. And then a lot of the best part of your network, I'm coming up on middle age, and the best part is like all these friends who are just goofballs from college are now directors and founders and VPs and all these amazing things. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're doing that? Whoa, okay, hey, can you do this? And then it just gets easy. So start early, just being a good person, always ask how you can help. Don't be afraid to volunteer some of your time. Just keep an eye on, make sure you're not getting taken advantage of course. Um, but kind of look for those opportunities to help, and then value will grow from there. It's just hard. Sports in particular, I know it's so hard to get into elite sports. It's so hard. It's all networking, at least in the States. um, Once you have to just find a way to get your foot in the door, and a lot of people are trying to do it. So these very competitive domains, you need to be pretty apt to um, find a clever way in if you don't have that network to begin with. But it's very doable. You just keep hustling. Just keep hustling. If you want to write about it, start a blog. You want to start a TikTok with it. Run around with a camera and a microphone. Try to find some pro sports. Trying to find some people. Try to find a niche. Always differentiate. It's up to you. If you're starting from scratch, it doesn't mean you're screwed. You're good. You're in good shape. Like, get out there and find your niche, find the unique thing that you want to do differently, and just hustle, create, and somebody will notice, and you'll morph and change. But once you start creating, people will notice, because not a lot of people create. um, and once you start creating, then people have something to judge you by, and then you'll change and you'll improve and you'll create poor things and then good things, and it'll go. So that would be my advice. Just takes time, but create your way through it.
Amazing. And I suppose as we go to come towards the end as well, Glenn, and working through to touch on that sports industry over the next few years and 5 years, looking towards the future, what do you think the sports industry is going to be looking like? And I suppose opportunities for employment and roles within the sports industry.
I see a few things happening. The one is quite obvious, is data. That this sports, the data coming out of these sports is really incredible. And not people don't really know. They think they do, but we don't really know how to build a complete profile of the athlete. And so we have so much data now. So it can be hard. The barrier to entry is really tough. And I know this because my data science company did some sports data. We did a lot of sports data. Um, and it's incredible. I would say that it's hard to do because you have to learn how to program, you have to do the data science, but learning to see how data can inform better performance on the pitch or on the court is going to be the thing. The good news is, if you're interested in that data, there are a lot of great data sets available that anybody can download. So you can start downloading and playing with them. You can start your own little data science blog predicting things. So I think the use of the data is going to be a really big one. We're coming right up onto it, and it's not saturated totally yet. I don't think it is. I think it will eventually. Somebody will probably own the space pretty well, but there's still a lot of room. And then that will transfer into everyday wearables, right? That'll transfer into the everyday athlete, and that's where the market is. I mean, Nike doesn't really care about these athletes. They don't really care. They care about you and me buying a pair of sneakers thinking we're ready to run. I mean, they don't really care. So remember where the big pots of money are. If you want to be an entrepreneur, go where the big pots of money are, right? Like the number of stories in sports where they work with one elite athlete, turn that into a scalable business. That's everywhere. So the big pots of money are not with in pro sports. Um, it's hard to make a ton of money, as far as I could tell. And there are some folks that do great. The athletes can do really well. Some of the coaches can do really well, but those organizations are businesses. So in the pro sports, at least here, the people who work in the business of running the company stay there for a long time. The coaches, the athletes, the trainers, kind of going everywhere. And that's the much sexier side of things. But maybe you're an elite athlete and stuff like that. If you're an elite athlete, think, how can I run this business? What would I do for merchandising? What would I do for branding? In the United States now, college athletes can profit off their name, image, and likeness. There's massive capital. So keep your eye on the big pots of money. I know the jazz is all about the elite Olympians and all that. Remember, the Olympics exist to sell you and me a bunch of athletic wear that we may or may not use. So that's where the money is. So follow that pot of money, and think about that. If you're an elite person right now, think how you're going to transition post-career to doing that. But also, and money is not the greatest thing in the world. Obviously, if you can find a way to carve a niche, then that's even better. So the second thing I was going to say is that of course the holistic version of the athlete is going to be big. Anything we can do to look at the athlete's mindset as a whole person is going to be really important. We ask a lot of these athletes who are essentially entertainers, and I'm not trivializing that, not at all. That's huge. We need sports. Sports are a vehicle for storytelling. Like, we need it. It's really, really great. But we tend to treat the athletes pretty poorly a lot of the time. We tend to, once they get hurt, we're like, get out of here, And so I'm hoping that the avenues to work on the inner game of the athlete, those are going to be really big. I mean, every Olympic athlete now probably is traveling with a performance coach. I know every F1 driver has a performance mindset coach. That person's probably making good money in those circles. So the mindset stuff is going to be very big business. And right now it's not done super well. It's done well in some cases. It's done fantastically. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. That's how you do it. Sometimes I'm like, that is terrible. So from my perspective, there's going to be a lot of development for sports industry entrepreneurship that focuses on mindset and does it well. So if you can combine data and mindset and performance, and effective change for these athletes, you're going to be in really good shape.
That's amazing. I really appreciate today, as we are coming through to the end, and as there's no questions, we seem to have got to everybody as well. A massive thank you for today, and I've taken a page full of notes, and I'm sure everybody's been able to walk away from this and hopefully see that entrepreneurship and the journey that can be absolutely rewarding at the same time. So a massive thank you for taking the time out of your afternoon. I'm sure on a beautiful sunny day in LA as well. So I thank you very much. And on behalf of us all here at the Education and Career Summit in Sport, we do thank you for attending this session, and we do look forward to seeing you at the other sessions as well.
Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter, Glenn R. Fox. Connect me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email, whatever I can do. It's really a pleasure. And thank you as always, Peter, and great best of luck to all the attendees. Go start your business. Go let it rip, man. It's the way to go.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All
Have
right.
an amazing
Bye,
day.
guys. Bye, everyone.